From Central Indiana's #1 news source, this is Fox 59 Tonight.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us here on Fox 59 Tonight. I'm Cameron Riddle. Thank you for downloading our new smart TV app on your Roku, Fire TV, Amazon TV, and Samsung TV, and Apple as well. Just search for Fox 59 now. You can get the app on any TV. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit the subscribe button so you never miss any of the conversations that we have every night at 8 o'clock right here on Fox 59 Tonight. I have a very special guest in the studio with us for this episode. He's here in town to talk with the Indianapolis Foundation. We've had that topic, that group on the show here recently to talk about how in this day and age of 2025 in Indiana, they are still going full throttle with diversity, equity, and inclusion. Somebody who knows more than just how to talk about it, but someone who studies this literally as a distinguished university professor at Princeton University is Dr. Eddie Glaude. He'll be leading a conversation for the Indianapolis Foundation here in Indianapolis. And then he also has a new book that's coming out. We are the leaders that we've been looking for. Of course, he is not only a author of a new book, he is a New York Times best-selling author, educator, and you may have seen him a time or two on TV on what was formerly known as MSNBC, now MS Now, or what I call Miss Now. Nevertheless, the very distinguished Dr. Eddie Glaude is in our studio. Thank you for coming to Indianapolis and spending a little time to talk to me, of all people. I appreciate your time.
No, I appreciate you. I appreciate the work that you're doing, and I'm delighted to have a chance to chat with you.
Well, thank you. I watch you on TV quite a bit, or I listen to you on the radio, and we are in, to say the least, an interesting time. In 2025, as I alluded, the words diversity, equity, and inclusion are not cool anymore. Mm-hmm. Those were hot words, buzzwords that everybody from Target to your local school to your local TV station to whoever, NBA, NFL, everybody's diversity, equity, inclusion. We're all for it. And now in places like Indiana, you have governments who have gone as far to say, you make sure every word of diversity, equity, and inclusion, black, brown, disparities, make sure those are out of your grants, make sure those are out of your mission statements. We have the Indiana Black Expo that hosts us every year. Mm-hmm. And every year they host a health fair that has always been called the Indiana Black and Minority Health Fair. This year was called the Indiana Health Fair. And so I say that to set the stage of where we are in Indiana, mm-hmm. where you're coming here to visit the Indianapolis Foundation, which is saying, nope. In fact, we're rolling out a whole new program about learning about racial disparities and equity because it's a conversation that we still need to have. And despite it not being cool anymore, we're going to stay true to that mission. So I think it's very appropriate that they brought you, a professor of African-American studies. I guess I'd start by asking you, one, does that sum up the moment that we're in, that now we're finding out who's true to this and who was just doing it because it was cool?
Yeah, it certainly was revelatory. And what we know is that just 5 years ago, just a blink of an eye, mm-hmm. We were supposedly in a racial reckoning, mm-hmm. grappling with the fact that we were all struggling with witnessing the murder of George Floyd and what that generated, what that mm-hmm. produced, this outcry, this sense of soul searching. And in less than 5 years, we find ourselves here. And the only thing I think you can conclude from that is that a lot of folk were lying. Mm-hmm. They weren't telling the truth. Mm-hmm. And, Ralph Ellison wrote a piece, the author of Invisible Man. He wrote a piece in 1970 in Time magazine entitled, "What Would America Be Like Without Blacks?" And what was fascinating about the piece is that he says whenever the country tires of the question or the matter of the pursuit of racial justice, of a democratically multiracial democracy, to put it that way, he says the country reaches for the fantasy of a lily white America. It has to get shut of black people. It reaches for the fantasy of secession. And so here we were in this moment where we were trying to grapple with what the contradiction at the heart of the nation. And folk were saying we overreached. that somehow the question of justice seeped beyond issues of sentimentality, people crying their crocodile tears, and actually dealt with structures and historic racism and the like. Folks said, no, that's going too far. And then suddenly we find ourselves in this moment where everyone, most people at least, except for the Indiana Foundation and others, a few others, are trying to redact any kind of concern around racial equity. That's what I love about what the Indiana Foundation is doing. It's Forward Movement Platform. All this is really trying to say, no, we may be in a moment of backlash, but we still have to grapple with the fundamental contradiction at the heart of the nation.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion, have become bad words, but we saw that it brought change. We saw that it brought, a diversity of thought to conversations, to newsrooms, just a lot of it became just basic common sense. If you look at the math and you say, hey, well, if 33% of your staff that you serve, whatever business or organization you're running, if 33% of them are black, how come there are no black people in your program that you're serving or that work here? And that forced some people just to say, you know what? All things aside, the math on that does not math.
Yeah.
And now people have been told that that's wrong without, like there was justification how you could say that makes sense. But there's been no justification to say why that is no longer the case.
Well, now folk are using the language of merit.
Correct.
They're worried about reverse discrimination, that white men in particular are locked out, are being locked out, that this is one of the reasons why we have these lonely men in basements turning towards extremists for accounts of their own situation and the like. And so you get this argument that folk are being admitted to elite institutions, they're gaining access to leadership positions in the private sector, in the public sector, not because they deserve it, but because big government and radical liberals are putting their thumbs on the scale and disadvantaging folk. And what we have to do is to call that for what it is. It's not true. To be honest with you, particularly in a moment where we see a lot of folk who don't seem to have, shall we say, a high level of competence in leadership positions around the nation. We have to say it's not true that folk like myself who happen to be at Princeton, we're not DEI hires. If we are, it's more a reflection of the institution than us. So if you didn't have an insistence that you consider the historic exclusion of particular populations, what would the country look like in certain spaces? That has nothing to do with me. It has something to do with the very ways in which people go about making decisions about how they're going to populate their particular businesses or how they're going to admit their student populations and the like. So I think it's a combination of things, Doc. We have been grappling with this contradiction since the founding. And here we are, barreling towards the 250th anniversary of the nation, and we're still fighting this question. Because, I'm going to be very, very frank with you. Because some people in the country believe that freedom is theirs to possess, to give to folk, and to take away. They think racial equality is a charitable or philanthropic enterprise as opposed to a matter of justice. And so we find ourselves moving through these cycles because people are asking themselves, well, what else do they want? And, and when you ask that question, then you reveal that you really don't think of us as human beings like you, because we want the same things you want.
You talk about you want the same things that you want. And I was watching you on MSNBC, and that was essentially...
You should start moving your collars when you start talking about it.
I know. It upset me that day. The basis of the conversation was what you just said, was we want what everybody else wants. And the conversation was in the 6 a.m. hour, maybe a month or two ago. You were sitting around, I assume you were sitting, I was listening in the car that day. but you were with Joe and Mika and a couple others. And the conversation was about the ICE raids in Chicago. And what I remember you saying, what I remember Joe Scarborough saying was that everybody essentially wants us. Everybody wants the police and wants to feel safe. And what I remember you saying was, yes, but there's a caveat to that. When I go into my neighborhood, if there's a police officer sitting there, would that be nice? Would that be safe? Does that mean he's patrolling the area? Sure, that's great. We're safer until you think that I'm the suspect. And what I heard you saying that morning was, sure, everybody would love to feel safe, but until you suspect that they are the one that could be causing trouble, no, I wouldn't want. And I think what you were saying was, that's true on one hand, but no, people don't want a police officer on every corner for the simple fact that they could suddenly be the one having to have a conversation with the police officer, not in the way that they want to. And in that conversation, no one seemed to understand you. And it felt like they were saying, yeah, Eddie Glaude, we don't know what you're talking about today. You're on your own on this one. In fact, they kind of moved on after a while because it went on for a while.
Yeah, we blew through a couple of commercial breaks.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I remember listening. I was like, no, I get what he's saying. And I think you even said something about when you walk into 30 Rock, nobody's questioning your motives or who you are. They know who you are. You're Dr. Eddie Glaude. But I also think what you were saying, but once I walk out that door, I'm still a black man. And unless I've got people walking around saying, hey, this is Eddie Glaude from Princeton, from MSNBC, that's a luxury that I believe you were saying that you have. But the average person who's going to walk down the street and walk past a police officer sitting on every corner or an ICE agent doesn't have that protection, that privilege for somebody to vouch for them to say, hey, this isn't the bad guy.
Yeah. I think, that conversation was a really fascinating one. And, my friends, Joe and Mika and Willie and Jonathan Lemire, they had been talking about the surge of ICE officers and the deployment of the National Guard in American cities, thinking about the issue of crime and how crime levels had to be addressed. And I felt that it was important for me in that moment to intervene in that conversation in a way to say, hold up, slow your roll, we've been here before. That just because Donald Trump is talking about crime doesn't mean that that's what Donald Trump is trying to do. So you find a moment of intersection between your embrace of law and order and Donald Trump's display of his executive power by deploying police and National Guards and women and ICE and Border Patrol agents in the cities. And he's claiming that crime is the motivation. You need to be careful because that's not really what he's up to. So that was the first point I wanted to make. And then the second point I wanted to make was that, we've been here before. We've seen communities devastated by appeals to law and order. A generation disappeared, the expansion of the carceral state, all in the name of a crackdown on crime, surging police officers into our community. And what do we have as the evidence that worked? That you're calling for it again? Right? And so there would be this argument that, this is part of the problem, this is a result of defunding X and defunding Y. I just disagree. And so part of what I wanted to do was to point to what was happening in Chicago, point to what was happening in Baltimore and across the country, where you have a different approach to crime, where you have partnerships with community-based programs, where we're trying to deal with those background social issues that generate, right, a whole host of problems within communities. That safety is different than law and order. For a community to be safe and secure isn't the same as arresting people and locking people up. That safety and security requires a different kind of mindset. And so calling for the surge of 5,000 police officers into Chicago, for me, was a non-starter. And the way in which I put it, I wasn't trying to speak for the community in Chicago. I wasn't trying to represent black people as such. But what I did speak from the heart is of deep concern for the communities I love, the communities out of which I come. And our relationship to the police is a complicated one. And if you don't acknowledge that, then you just don't understand the history of policing in America. And so it was an intense conversation, let's put it that way. But I thought I made my point.
Yes. I was sitting in the car listening, and I was like, no, again, that relationship, that's kind of where it ended, but it was about that relationship with the police is different. So what Joe Scarborough was hearing, well, everybody says they want to feel safe. Yes, but that doesn't mean put an officer on every corner. That may not be what makes them feel safe.
Particularly when Donald Trump is deploying law enforcement not for the protection of particular communities. I mean, when we look at D.C., where are they deployed? Where's the National Guard deployed? When we think about what ICE is doing and what the Border Patrol is doing, how are they transforming, right, the condition, the material conditions of folk in those communities? That's a performance. And so I think it's really important that in those moments, we don't have to virtue signal. We're not performing our politics for constituencies. In those sorts of moments, we have to speak authentically and from our hearts and with truth that a surge in policing is not the answer to rising crime levels in our communities. Something more systemic and holistic. And to his credit, Joe Scarborough said he agreed with that part of it. But he still thinks that you need to drop 5,000 police officers in a city and make communities feel like they're being occupied as opposed to being protected. Because let me say this, we know our communities are overly surveilled and underprotected. They're there, but it doesn't change the quality of our living. So, let's be honest about what the reality is, it seems to me.
Well, and then there's a difference of any of those police, whoever they are. Right now, if we had a police officer whose job was to protect this building, I'm going to feel protected because, okay, you are here to protect me versus it's a whole lot different when you're sitting outside on your porch and a cop rolls up. It's like, whoa, hold on, I didn't invite you. Nothing's going on over here. It's a whole different relationship. And depending on who you are, somebody like Joe Scarborough might get off the porch and get up and say, hey, officer, what's going on? Welcome to the neighborhood. But not everybody's going to have that same privilege that Joe would have with that relationship. And I think that's where the conversation was really getting lost.
Yeah, history speaks in those moments. Absolutely does.
That whole conversation, to me, because you were the only one who's, at the time, no one won, and I was listening, so I don't believe at the time there was anybody else who looked like you or was coming from the same background that you did to back you up. That's why it felt like the man is alone here, but I can hear you. I'm with you. But that's the point of diversity, equity, and inclusion, to have that other thought, that other perspective on reality, the project, the goal. But if we're saying we don't want diverse thought, we don't want to include different people, then we lose.
Look, how many McKinsey reports do we have to cite to talk about the importance of diverse boardrooms, of diverse leaderships, of leadership teams, a diverse student body that improves and deepens the quality of the experience on college and university campuses? How many reports do we need to show that that's actually the fact, right? I mean, we don't need another McKinsey report. We just need folk to act right. Right, and we need to tell the truth about what's really motivating this. Right now, we're in the midst of relitigating the mid-20th century social revolutions. We're relitigating the Black freedom struggle. We're relitigating the women's movement. We're relitigating the gay liberation movement. Right now, there are folk who are nostalgic. They're longing for a period when certain folk knew their place and other folk were at the center of everything. And it seems to me, in this global context, let's just be clear. If America thinks it's going to lead the world, right, by sidelining all of this talent, by putting all of these folk on the bench, the country will lose. There's no way that's going to happen. And so part of our challenge is to smoke out the underlying assumptions that are driving the assault on DEI. DEI has its problems. It's a shorthand. Some people view diversity, equity, and inclusion as a way of managing difference. It's a kind of corporate term. They don't value diversity, right? And what does it mean to value diversity is to think about it as constitutive of the mission and vision of your institution. It's part of the 360 assessment of whether or not you're hitting all of your marks. But some people want to manage diversity, to keep it, they want to hit their little benchmarks. Well, see, I did this, right? I met my quota here. It's not a value. And so we have an opportunity, right, to really rethink how diversity, equity, and inclusion works, right, in our workplaces, in the society in general. So we don't have folk who are just ticking off checking off boxes. Rather, we have folk who actually value it, like the Indiana Foundation. But I think the task, though, Doc, is we're going to have to smoke out the underlying assumptions. And the underlying assumptions, I think, for many of these folk, is that we are not as valued as other folk. How else do you explain what the Department of Defense is doing with regards to Black soldiers who risk their lives? How else are you to explain, admissions at Harvard and Yale and Brown and Princeton plummeting, right? But, so it seems to me what we're dealing with is something that is constitutive of the country, that some people believe that America, at its best, is a white republic. And you and I and others need to understand that and act accordingly. Well, I fundamentally disagree with that. And I think our task is to tell the truth in the face of it, no matter the consequences, even in Indiana.
The fact that we're having this conversation is a step back in time.
Yeah.
People who fought for this progress obviously feel a type of way. And if you go back 5 years, when we had protests and riots in the street, we had both here in Indianapolis. I was down there covering it as it happened. We were seeing the next generation. That's one what helped kick all this off. But we were also seeing some of the next generation of leaders. But even before we got to 2025 or 2024, the steam seemed to dissipate. The foot was taken off the gas of those people who were becoming leaders. When we were having the protests, after a while, this is happening every day. So I know them, they know me, and I'm like, okay, where are we walking to today? What's, you learn who the movers and shakers are. And for a while, it felt like that they had the ear and could get whatever it is that they needed. We had an incident in town where, in hindsight, maybe it got blown out of proportion, but there was a restaurant downtown that did not want a bus stop outside of their restaurant. Now, they said it's because when the bus, they had patio, it's COVID seating, but they said when the bus pulls up, it blows all the smoke and the dirt and just, onto the people who are sitting. And we know who rides the bus. And so that was the juxtaposition that it felt like that they were saying, we don't want that bus to stop here to bring a certain type of people in this area. And when the protesters and the leaders of the protests didn't do anything about that, like there's basically no response because they were tired.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, you just lost because people were waiting to find out what you were going to ask, demand, or say, and they fell off. And some of those same people have been frustrated with the leadership that gets elected and gets put in. And to me, it made it feel like all of that was all a very, 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 very short moment. Whereas if you go back into the civil rights movement, this was a prolonged, like this stuff didn't happen overnight. This didn't happen over a couple of weeks. You can't just, okay, you protested, Joe Biden get in office. Okay, it's all fixed now, right? You got it from here, Joe.
Right.
To me, that's what it felt like happened. And then when people were upset, well, why couldn't Joe Biden get all of this? Or why didn't this get done?
Right.
Because we're putting it all on one person when it's a group effort that does not happen overnight.
You know, I mean, I think that's a fascinating description of a state of affairs. And you know, the great Bob Moses, who was so important for our freedom, was a member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, was one of the masterminds of Mississippi Freedom Summer, worked in Macomb, Mississippi with COFO and others. He told me once when he was at Princeton, he said, you know, when elections are the object of your organizing, you build in the demobilization of your movement. Because if you lose, you're demobilized. If you win, you're demobilized. So elections can't be the aim and end of what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to achieve justice, and that's a practice that is ongoing. And, you know, I'm going to talk about Miss Ella Baker tonight. And, you know, she understands the importance of mobilizing folk. That's what protests do. Protests or marches, according to James Lawson. He has a wonderful new book out, the late James Lawson, entitled Nonviolence, a memoir. He says that the march is designed or aimed at focusing the attention, right, as mobilizing, right, folk to kind of focus on a particular set of issues. But the march is not the end. The protest is not the end. It is actually a stage as you move to civil disobedience, as you move to the next level of struggle. We seem to get stuck at the march these days. We actually think that that's the protest, you see. And so part of what we have to do is to understand that our moment requires of us a kind of an imaginative leap. We have to imagine politics in a way that isn't kind of reducible to a kind of mimicry of the 1960s, that isn't reducible to just simply electoral politics, as if the aim and end is to just elect someone that we think will represent our issues and then we can move on. We have to understand, at least in my view, that if we're going to save our democracy, if we're going to transform our everyday experiences of life, that we're going to have to be organizing day in and day out around a set of particular issues, whether it's education, whether it's policing, whether it's housing, whether it's living wage. We're going to have to do that work, right? And that requires a toolkit. The Indianapolis Foundation is going to require a set of practices and behaviors that aren't kind of geared toward you, the press or the camera. It's going to require on-the-ground activity and organizing. That's a different approach. Now, there are moments where you're going to need the kind of spectacular event of the protest itself. But, you know, the deliverables will come in the hard work that's being done on the ground, outside of the cameras. Because at the end of the day, Doc, politicians ain't going to save us. I said that in 2024 or 2020, I said that you know, people are longing to see the back of Donald Trump's head. You know, I'm a country boy from Mississippi. They're longing to see the back of Donald Trump's head, and they think the moment they get him out of office, everything will be all right. And I said, no, that's because you're exceptionalizing him. You think that that's the source of the trouble. The trouble cuts much deeper because the trouble's in us. We're the serpents in the garden, not him. He's just a reflection of the rot that's deeper. And so we are the leaders, as I say in the book. We are the leaders we've been looking for. And I got that from Miss Ella Baker. That's not my own thing. So I think your description is a description of the frustration with contemporary forms of politics and protest. Yeah.
In my mind, when I go back of, covering news and events over the last 5 years, that is to me how we got here. What feels to me like a whole 180 from what we were doing in 2025, just as fast as, we talk about, I'm a member of the National Association of Black Journalists who's been talking about.
Wonderful organization.
Yes, fantastic. Shout out to all of our members here in Indianapolis. How we are seeing Black journalists get shown the door, Black reporting units go away just as quick as they were created in 2020. And so as I think of how did we get here? How did we go from a 180? And all I can see is the people who we thought, there was a time when we were protesting, you're like, now that person up there might be something. I don't know if that person's going to be the next mayor in 10 years or some kind of elected official or community leader, but you could see these grassroots leaders. And it was almost like, and it's funny, that's what your book is called, is We Are the Leaders We've Been Looking For. It almost felt like that they only felt their mission at the time was to get the attention, to have somebody else do it, to solve the problem. And you say, and what I reflect on is that, no, in that moment, you were the leader and you had the power to do something about it. And you did for a while.
No, I think there are a number of things that work there, right? So one is, we think that oftentimes we are positioned as the left wing of the Democratic Party. And we think that all we need to do is get Democrats in office and we've achieved our aims and ends. Well, that's a lie. That's not true. And then you combine that with the sentimental approach. James Baldwin has this wonderful formulation. He says sentimentality is a mask for cruelty. What does he mean? Right? Somebody will cry crocodile tears over your circumstance, and those tears have really nothing to do with you. They often just reflect their own narcissistic preoccupations. That it's an affirmation. Their tears become an affirmation of their goodness, that they're not one of them. And when those tears dry up, that sentimentality, right? Oh, what can we do for them? Oh, what can we do to resolve this issue? And when that question is the response to that question consists of more demands for justice, then what more do you want? Because there's the sentimental orientation, Doc, is that racial justice is a philanthropic enterprise, as if justice is their possession to give to us. And so once that is exhausted, once absolution doesn't follow, these folk immediately get enraged, right? So we find ourselves moving through this cycle of sentimentality and rage, right? One moment they cry crocodile tears, the next moment they want to get rid of us. That's why Uncle Tom and Nat Turner are two sides of the same coin in the American imagination. And so part of what we see in that moment is that, the outpouring of charity and then the exhaustion, right? Then the exhaustion because justice isn't the motivation. So I think there's a combination of things. We have to do politics in a variety of ways. We have to understand the importance of elections, and we have to understand electoral politics. We have to understand the importance of organizing on the ground where communities are doing the work that democracy requires day in and day out. It's not every 2 years or every 4 years. Democracy is a daily enterprise.
Well, what is missing from people who you get inspired, but where's the fuel that keeps all that going? Because everything you're naming doesn't happen overnight or, as you said, in 2 years or 4 years. Is it the new generation of that we're used to things being so instant, and that it's like, even if you look at some of the things that the Republican initiatives and goals didn't happen over a 4-year.
No, they've been doing this since the 60s.
You know, the overturn of Roe v. Wade didn't happen with one president. That's been something that's been going on. Like, hey, we're working
Since
to
the
it.
decision of Roe v. Wade, they've been trying to undermine it, right?
So what is it on that side that, to me, it feels like they understand, all right, this is a long-term game. But I don't feel that on this side, the energy is very short-term, very, I need to see something, I need to be in love with this one politician, and they have to be perfect. What is the difference there? Because I feel like that's what's keeping things from, that's how we got here.
I admit I run my mouth for a living, but I don't have all the answers. And I think it's important for us to admit when we don't have all the answers. I mean, I have some intuitions and about the problem. One, of course, is the big tent nature of the Democratic Party. There are a range of constituencies. Some who are on the right in the Democratic Party are basically Rockefeller Republicans. We've seen the ideological spectrum shift, where in our current day, Walter Mondale would be considered radical, right, in our current moment, because of the legacy of the Democratic Leadership Conference and the Third Way Democrats, where you get Republican light, triangulation, and all these other things, where you and I, where black politics is reducible to a kind of wink and nod. I can't really speak directly to you. I'm going to wink at you so I got your interest, but I'm going to go into these back rooms and broker in light of my own set of concerns. So we've seen the distortion of black politics along with the shift, right, the shift rightward in American politics generally. That's impacted it, right? And then there's something else. This is something that goes back to the Civil War to me. When the country split and left over 600,000 plus dead on the battlefield, there were some who disagreed with secession, but they agreed with the South. They called them Copperheads. They disagreed with the idea that the South should pull away and try to start its own nation, but they agreed with the basic assumptions of slavery. They agreed with the basic assumptions of white supremacy and the like. We got a lot of modern-day Copperheads. They might not like the way in which the current MAGA Republican Party functions, but they agree with some of the underlying, the Venn diagram. There's a kind of overlap. And so our coalition is much more complicated in so many ways, because there's some folk over there who are, how can I put it? A lot of them are all kind of bound up with a certain kind of corporatist approach to American politics, right? Money corrupts souls across the board. I mean, I'll say this really quickly. When we think of two stories right now, Doc, when we think of the Epstein story, and we think of the White House visit by the Saudi prince MBS, and we think of these two very noxious human beings, troublesome character, to put it mildly, right? And you say, okay, this guy was a sex trafficker. He raped young girls. This guy, right, ordered, at least allegedly, the murder of a Washington Post reporter. Why are folks still dealing with these people? What are the emails revealing? Right? Not that folk were sex traffickers with Epstein, but they're revealing that folk wanted his money. They wanted his funding. The same thing with MBS. Money. And so what we see over and over again, and this is where the overlap happens, is that big money corrupts the soul and can block the way to any fundamental efforts to build a just society. That's a long-winded, rambling answer to your question. And the short version of it is, I don't know, but I have some intuitions, right? I have some intuitions. But if at the end of the day, it's not going to be up to any of these folks. It's going to be up to us.
Among the things that are up to us is some of the conversations you'll be having with the Indianapolis Foundation. Again, they have an app we talked about.
Yeah.
We had Lee Riley Evans, who was here in this seat last week. And she talked about the app and their forward movement. If you missed that episode, I'll just read you this briefly. It is an app. It's the 2.0 version. It's a digital app designed to educate, engage, and mobilize individuals to be actively anti-racist while working to disrupt a systematic racism through interactive learning, meaningful dialogue, and opportunities for real-world action. The forward movement helps you deepen your understanding, strengthen your voice, and join others committed to building the lasting change together. They will get through things, create a community and a nation known for being inclusive, equitable, and boldly anti-racist. Yeah. All of that connects back to everything that we talked about. From doing this work alone, to finding somebody to do it with, to continuing to do something even when it's not cool. Mm-hmm. You know, everybody's pulled their DEI funding. It's gone. So it is good that we still have organizations like the Indianapolis Foundation that said, hey, that money, we put that aside. We're still going to do what it is that we do. So people can check out the app, Indianapolis Foundation Forward Movement. What about this as we get ready to wrap up made you decide that how does this align with what you are trying to get people to understand day in and day out?
We can't retreat in this moment. We can't be complicit with our silence. Mm-hmm. And you know, one of the big stories of the moment isn't just simply the all-out assault on DEI, but it's the great capitulation. Mm-hmm. You have universities and businesses and law firms and the like who are pulling back DEI, and they're not even in the crosshairs. Mm-hmm. They're just worried about getting sued, mm-hmm. right? And so one of the things I love about the Indianapolis Foundation, right, is that it's really centered around a series of components that are necessary for ongoing struggle. First, you got to tell a different story. Mm-hmm. You got to narrate. You got to tell a story about where the contradiction emanates, how it has been reproduced over time and space. You got to build capacity. You got to build capacity by giving folk the tools requisite for them to understand the world. That's in concert with the storytelling and giving them the tools so that they can identify particular problems that impact their day-to-day living. And you create the conditions for coalition building so that they can actually get about the hard work of fighting, mm-hmm. right? Of fighting for a more just America. In this moment, we cannot retreat. We cannot find comfort in the illusion of safety. Mm-hmm. Yes, the folk are out, and they are coming at us, you know, with all of their resources blazing. Our response cannot be to cower. We must exhibit the virtue of courage because all other virtues follow from it. So I am here because the Indianapolis Foundation refuses to cower, right? And it's leading the way in a fight that we must continue to fight because if we don't, we may very well lose our democracy as we know it.
All of it also connects back to what you were saying in your book. What the Indianapolis Foundation is trying to do is we're the next leaders. And if they pick up your book, We Are the Leaders That We've Been Looking For, you might just find it right there in the mirror. Dr. Eddie Glaude, thank you so much. I enjoyed talking to you. I always enjoy watching you on TV and listening to you on the radio. And I'm glad to have some time with you to talk about.
I appreciate you. Keep doing what you're doing, Doc.
Thank you, sir.
Take care.
Appreciate you. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of Fox 59 Tonight. We are here every night at 8 o'clock. Of course, you can talk with me every weekend on the radio, on my radio show 106.7 WTLC for open lines. Also on Hot 100.9, we'll have more conversations like this where you also get to call in and be part of that conversation on our live line. Until we talk again here on TV, have a good night. We'll see you on another night at 8 o'clock.